Hey guys, welcome to Manifesting Better. I'm back with another video and another topic that needs to be addressed. I also have an Instagram account, the link for that is in the description box below. Coaching is also available, the link for that too is in the description box below. So, in today's video, I will be talking more about why is it so difficult to persist sometimes. Why does it get difficult when we start a process and when we do certain routines and when we do certain methods that we can start and do it only for a certain amount of days? And why is it so that once we start living as the new version of ourselves, when we start living in the end, we can only do it for so long and then we have to stop? So before we get into it, I need to explain something to you about our mind, about our brain, about how it works and about why these things happen. So think about your brain as something that has only one job, and that job is to help you survive as a person. And when I say survive as a person, your mind actually doesn't care if you are in a relationship or not. Your mind actually doesn't care if you are happy or not. It just cares about one thing, that you are surviving. And your survival depends on your mind's ability to predict what will happen next. Let me explain. Over a period of time, your mind develops and your mind takes in information. Now, that information it takes in is in few methods. First, it's through your past experiences, which means that things that happened to me when I was younger, things that are happening to me now, things that have happened to me before in my relationships, with money, with businesses, with jobs, everything. Then it takes in information from the outside world, maybe the movies that we see, maybe the books that we read. And then we take in second hand information from the people around us, which means, let's say something bad happened in a relationship with one of my friends. So I take in information from that relationship and I start to suit myself in those particulars. And I start to learn from that relationship too, which means I don't have to necessarily just learn from my failures. I will probably learn from others' failures too. So if I see someone putting their hand in the fire and it gets burnt, I will also learn that putting my hand in my fire will burn it for me, right? So our brain first gathers this information, because without that information it will have nothing to make a prediction on. And our brain cannot work with unpredictable things. It cannot digest this idea that some things are uncontrollable. That is why, based on this information and based on every information it gains, it tries to predict what will happen next. So for example, when I wake up, my brain tries to predict what will happen next. Maybe this thing will happen. And similarly, in relationships, in money, in businesses, when we are trying to manifest something, because for a certain amount of time we have been an old version of ourselves, and that old version consists of a belief system, consists of boundaries, consists of some actions, consists of some perceptions that our brain has gotten accustomed to, and it predicts things according to how the old version of ourselves would react, would think, would talk, would act, and would perceive a particular situation. So let's say something bad happens to me, and or something just happens. It's not necessarily bad, but something just happens. And because over a period of time I have become accustomed to assuming it in a certain way, my brain will want that predictability because it helps it to feel in control. So my brain will feel a little bit in control with the possibility that, oh, I can predict what will happen next. Even though in reality we cannot exactly predict what will happen exactly in the next moment, but it gives our brain the illusion of the idea that yes, I'm totally in control, right? So because of that, when we start to set a new routine for ourselves, when we start to work as the new version of ourselves, maybe we start to persist with some affirmations, some methods, some techniques, whatever it is. Maybe we start to put up different boundaries, maybe we start to have different actions, maybe we start to have a different mindset through the techniques that I mentioned before. What happens is that for a small amount of time, once we do it, we hit a roadblock, and that roadblock is usually our brain feeling threatened with the idea that this might mean that I'm actually going to change, and that change might mean that our brain will not be as efficient into assuming and predicting what will happen next. So because my brain doesn't like the idea of not knowing what to assume, not knowing what to predict, because I'm not acting as the way that I used to act before, it tries to test me a little bit, and it will throw resistance at me.
So it will throw everything it has just to check if I'm changing for real, or if this is just one of those temporary times that I have always pretended to change but I haven't. So that's why when I start to get into my new habits, and when I start to persist, or when I am living in the end, resistance starts to come, because my brain is basically checking to see if my change is for real, or is it something that I have always done, the temporary things that we do. Because it doesn't really want to fully adapt to the new version of me until it knows that it's permanent. Because if it adapts to it once, and after adapting to it we change again, or we go back to our old patterns again, it will have to change again. That's why it will sometimes get so difficult for us to persist, because once we start getting into this zone, our mind will start to throw resistance at it, because it doesn't feel that we are for real, that we will really change. It feels that this is one of those times where we pretended to change but we didn't. And that is why sometimes it gets so difficult to persist, because our mind is trying to hold on to the identity that we have had for a long time, and it doesn't want to change it without the guarantee that we will not change it back. So that is why the only thing that you can do while you are trying to persist as the new version of you and resistance starts to come to you is to stick with the newer identity consistently, even though in that moment it might not be very healthy. Not in terms of, when I say healthy, I don't mean it in terms of that it's not healthy to change. It means that it might not be very convenient for us to change in that moment. So I will also give you a few tips on how you can get better at persisting, because after you implement these tips, it will get better to handle this resistance that comes up. First of all, if you are someone who has tried to change themselves before and haven't been able to do it, the first thing that you can do, and the most important thing that you can do, is you can find out how long does it take for you to react, which means every person has a certain time frame. In that time frame they have a tendency to react. So for example, let's say there is someone who starts a gymming workout, or there is someone who starts to persist in a new set of affirmations but isn't able to hold on to them after a period of time. What is very important is to understand what that period of time is. Let's say for someone it's 5 to 6 days, that after every 5 to 6 days I go back to being the old me. Or for someone it is 3 days. Because once we know what that time period is, it will get easier for us to deal with it. Because let's say it's a 7-day period, and let's say I'm talking about affirmations, then the downfall doesn't start on the 7th day. The downfall starts on the 6th day or the 5th day, when I start to get complacent, and when I start to introduce the possibility in my mind that I might not have to do the affirmations, or I might not have to go to the gym, or I might not have to change myself day after tomorrow, because my mind is celebrating the change that it has made for the 5 days, and it feels that if even if I miss it on the 6th and the 7th day, it will be okay. So once I am in that zone, it's very important to plan for it accordingly. That's the first thing. Because if I know that on the 7th day I have a tendency to not persist, to miss my affirmations, to miss my breath work, to miss my gymming workouts, whatever it is, then on the 6th day I can plan the 7th day according to that. And I can make sure that once I plan the 7th day according to that, so that I don't miss it on that day. Because honestly, if you start to persist on that 7th day, what will happen is that slowly you will also start to persist on the 8th and the 9th and the 10th, and then you are just increasing the time where your brain throws resistance at you. Secondly, what you can do is you can start in a smaller way, which means sometimes we only start in such a huge way because in our mind knows that starting in this huge way won't last very long. So for example, let's say think about it this way, that I am someone who has had a very hard time into believing that I can be loved. And I start persisting in the affirmations so much, or I start thinking that I will do it so long, because a part of my brain knows that it won't be sustainable. Another example of that would be, let's say I wake up at 10 a.m. every day and I want to wake up at 6. It's possible, but it's not very feasible in the long term, because what will happen is that that 4-hour jump might be too much for my brain to handle, and in itself that's a way to sabotage for my mind, because my mind knows that I won't be able to make that 4-hour skip for a very long time. So it lets me think that, oh, okay, go for that 4 hour skip, because in my mind it knows that it's not sustainable. So it also knows that it will just be a temporary way that I do it for a few days and I will skip it after 5 or 6 days. Because we want to make it easy for us to persist. We want to make it easy for us, and we want it to be so natural for us to persist that everything that we are doing just falls in line. We cannot persist on willpower alone. It has to become a habit, it has to become natural, it has to be something that would be easier to do rather than difficult to do. So, for example, it would be easier for me to not chase my specific person if I'm not stalking them on social media. It would be easier for me to not constantly text them if I'm not constantly reading their chats. It would be easier for me to maybe believe that I'm worthy of money if I'm not always criticizing myself for not having enough. So these things make it natural for me to persist. They give me an easier way out to persist. They give me a green card into going to change myself, because if I'm going to be putting roadblocks in front of me consistently, that just makes it a little bit difficult for me to actually follow the new version of me and to follow my new plan. That is why our mindset is not the only thing that needs to be in alignment. Our actions and our boundaries and everything that we do should be in alignment, because we are here to build healthy habits for a long period of time. We are not here to build healthy habits for a short time and then give it up. I will be making another video discussing more habits like these, because there are a lot of them and I want to really go deeper into this. And if you guys have any comments and any video suggestions or any questions, please post them in the comments below. I will try to look at them. I will try to answer them either via a post or a video. When I say post, I mean it on Instagram. I also do weekly Q&As on my Instagram. So if you want to ask me a question there, you can just wait for a question and answer session and you can ask me there. I will see you guys in the next video.
Click the like button if you liked the video. Subscribe and turn the notifications on for more such content. Comment down your video suggestions and I will see you guys in the next one.